Okay, here we are again. More, more randomness. Here we go. I've always kind of wanted to have this conversation. Just didn't know when or where, but there really isn't the best time. So it's happening today. Um, I spoke on before about the mass self-awareness that is happening right now, where people are starting to learn more about themselves, about the people around them, and about how what's going on isn't exactly what we all thought was going to happen, and how that's causing a whole lot of feelings, you know, pain, suffering, happiness, joy. A lot of people's egos are being inflated, and there's a lot of ego death happening at the same time. And I want to speak on that, especially as a, conventionally attractive man, how getting to that self awareness is pretty much like life or death at this point. Um, Figuratively and, you know, metaphorically, it's pretty much necessary at this point to kind of have that self awareness because yeah, how you are perceived is pretty much going to dictate where you're going to go, which is, most people know that on more of like a service level, but I feel like we're getting to the point where we're going to have to like start saying these things out loud. Um, I always, for the vast majority of my life, thought that I was just some regular dude. I was just Dimitri. I didn't think I was anything special. I thought I was, pretty cool. I can do a lot of really cool things. I had some pretty cool ideas, but because of how I was being treated, the ostracization I was facing, pretty much everywhere I went, where I didn't feel safe being myself, which is, pretty common occurrence for neurodivergent people, especially if you're like a big presence, if you're attractive in any way, shape, or form, you stand out. You're definitely going to be ostracized, and that's been happening all over the world, all throughout time. Especially now since people aren't as similar. We aren't as symmetrical as we used to be. People just used to look very similar to each other for a very, very long time, and now people are just kind of looking. We are definitely the most diverse when it comes to looks, um, probably ever. It's just like all over the world, different races, different genders. We are just definitely looking different, and that's definitely causing a whole lot of feelings. People are feeling a certain type of way about it, depending on how you are, who you are. But coming to that self awareness for yourself is very integral to continue evolving as a species, as humans. We have to get to the point where we understand exactly who we are, where we come from, where we stand, and now allowing any type of outside influence to keep us off of that because of how they feel, and where they feel like that they want to go. Like I said before, longest time I thought I was just some regular dude, just trying to make it, just trying to do his best to get to where he needed to go, where he needed to be, and it for the most part, I always still gravitated towards where I was supposed to go. You know, it never really was like a hindrance of me not having that more well-rounded self-awareness of myself. But at the same time, it definitely led me to some situations where if I would have had more self-awareness of who I was and how I was being portrayed by others, I would have made a lot more changes. I think that's where a lot of people are as well, where they would have made more changes if they would have known these things about themselves, about how they're being perceived by others, since people don't seem to have the courage to say those things. People feel a certain type of way about other people, very, very, passionate feelings. Not always, love is just any type of feeling that kind of, overwhelms them. They kind of keep it to themselves or kind of suppress them, even if it's on a subconscious level. We're all susceptible to it, including myself. I know I've done that multiple times. So it's like when you don't have that self-awareness, you're definitely kind of on autopilot, which is never a bad thing. But the earlier you get that self-awareness about where you are, how people are going to perceive you, you're going to be there's going to be a lot less confusion about how people treat you and how people are going to deal with you in social situations or just situations in general. People have been very kind to me, overly kind to me in a lot of situations, and a lot of people have been very aggressive towards me in situations. People just being there's always been the spectrum of love, hate towards me, and it was confusing for the vast majority of my life. It still is going to be confusing because it's going to constantly be shifting and mutating. So I can't really expect for it to be one specific way my whole entire life, nor should anybody else. But I got out of this. I've gained so much more self-awareness from getting a lot of information about myself, and part of that information was just blackpilling myself about what the world really is, and how I went about it. I think was very beneficial to me because I didn't choose to blackpill myself for myself. I didn't really want to know more about me. I wanted to know more about other people. It was very confusing why people not only treat me the way that they treat me, but also why do people treat others differently than me? Why are people not only being cruel to me, but being crueler to other people? Are people being kind to me, but not as kind to other people, or even kinder to other people, but being very cruel to me, vice versa? It was very confusing. I was still kind of in the mindset of, oh, we can all choose about what we want to do and where we want to go. We all have that free will. Humans and animals are different. That people are just kind of just being the way that they are, consciously, and it's just people are just choosing just to do all these things, and it was just very confusing. Like, why would someone choose to be maliciously attacking someone? Why would someone choose to just put someone down, like right in front of others? And why will people choose to ostracize people? And these things just didn't make a lot of sense to me, from a social sense. Socially, it didn't make a lot of sense why people did these things. But once I started looking more into the biology of humans, then things started making a lot more sense. Things started to connect to where now it makes a lot of sense about why people act the way that they act. And yeah, it's pretty much integral to get to that type of self-awareness, to be like, oh, okay, what you're doing makes way more sense now. Before it didn't. Socially, it made no sense. Why are you doing these things? But now it makes a lot of sense. And blackpilling myself for other people was just such a huge eye-opening experience. A lot of thoughts and tears and confusion at first. An understanding, that how in the realm of dating, or just not even dating, it's not even pigeonhole this, in the realm of relationships, all types of relationships, like familiar, um, your relationship with your family, your friends, your intimate partners. All those relationships are very, very biological, and they're not as social as people want to believe that they are. There's always going to be a social element to it, but a lot of them is just biology. And we definitely aren't taught that in school, at least not here in the United States, about how much biology plays in how people socialize with each other. With me being, a big presence, being an attractive, dark-skinned black man, 6'2", I'm in pretty good shape. I'm in great shape. Even for my age, I'm 31. Um, it was something that once I got to that understanding about how biology is going to determine so much about how people treat you and how you're going to treat others, it just made so much of what people did make, I don't want to say make sense, because when you take the biology and you add the social, a lot of what we do doesn't make a whole lot of sense, depending on your framework, how you want to look at it. But it makes, I guess, short-term sense. It doesn't make long-term sense. A lot of what we do does make short-term sense, but in the long term, it definitely doesn't. It definitely doesn't seem to be something that people are doing to better themselves. Like ostracizing someone doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the long term. But in the short term, it makes a lot of sense, socially and biologically. But getting to that self awareness for myself by looking at other people, especially incels, the type of people that we've always known exist, but we never really gave them unilaterally a name. We've had like nerds and outcasts, yeah, the weird kids, and it's just we've always had different labels for these types of people, men and women. But I'm not even sure exactly when the incel term got coined. I know it was created by a woman on a forum, but men like normal just kind of hijacked it and took it for themselves, and now we have a whole group of men who have this label that has helped them cope with their existence a lot better than what they were doing, what we all were collectively doing before then, by pretty much just lying to people, honestly, kind of like gaslighting them to a point where they had this vision of themselves and how they were going to be perceived that was just completely the opposite of what was actually going to happen. Like I was saying with relationships, people are constantly trying to overcompensate with their inadequacies in biology with things that are going to give them a lot of social currency. And short term, that's definitely going to work, but long term, you have to pretty much keep up that facade for the rest of your life, and that seems like a special type of hell that I don't ever want to experience. With constantly chasing validation through money and through status and through materialistic items. It's short term, yeah, it's definitely going to get you a lot closer to be the person that you want to be. But long term, yeah, it definitely doesn't seem to track that's actually going to get you where you want to be. You want to start a family. That pretty much is like a biological thing, You have to have two people who love each other, and the vast majority of people do not love themselves, let alone love uh, love someone else. You know, so it's definitely something that's been getting exposed more and more. That's why marriage is on a collapse, but it's just people are just getting more awareness of what marriage is, and marriage is about two people who love each other. And to get to that point, to love someone else, you have to love yourself. And it's becoming increasingly more difficult for people to love themselves once they're constantly comparing themselves to other people and seeing what they don't have on a biological level, not so much on a social level. People are definitely understanding what their, high paying jobs and their status with those with, that comes with that job, and gaining that material wealth. It is still not enough to achieve what someone else might have with none of those things socially, but they are definitely more blessed biologically wise with their height, with their intelligence, with their health, with their other genetic gifts that they have. Depends, varies from person to person. Those things that cannot be taught, those things that cannot be that can be influenced, but only to a certain extent. Those are pretty much going to make or break. Those are pretty much going to set the foundation of who you are as a person, and you can't really run from that. People are just coming to that realization, but from their own different perspectives. And I think that's what makes an incel an incel. I feel like the route that I took to get here and the route that they took to get here are we pretty much took two different routes to get to the same conclusion, because we're coming from it from a different perspective. I would never truly know what it is like to be an incel. I don't know what it's like to be invisible. I've never been invisible a day in my life. I couldn't be if I wanted to. I stand out everywhere I go. Even if I was I forgot what the tallest country is in Africa is, but even if I was there, I would still stand out. You know, just the nature of how things are. I'm very much, I won't say like one of a kind, but I'm very rare compared to the average man out here. And it is becoming more and more apparent every single time I go out. I'm just constantly getting looked at by people. And another blessings of that self-awareness is, me not becoming offended by those looks, those stares. Even though, some of those stares are coming from people who do not have good intentions, at the end of the day, like a wise man once said, either you're somebody or you're nobody. And being a somebody is just an experience that is just hard to really quantify in words, honestly. It's not good, it's not bad, it's neutral. But man, it's just it's definitely an experience for sure. You're definitely, it's never a dull moment being a somebody. Just how you the reactions, the conversations, just how you move around in the world is just this way. Like I said, it's very hard to put into words, but maybe one day I'll figure that out. Figure it out. But getting to that self-awareness by blackpilling myself about looks and about what attracts people to each other, especially how people, especially women, they just gravitate towards faces. Children do this, animals do this. Learning that you can learn a lot about someone, their biology, by just looking at their face. That's not something else that isn't really hammered on in schools, but you can just tell a whole lot about who someone is. Not everything, but a decent amount about who someone is just by looking at their face, looking at their features, seeing how symmetrical everything is, seeing how things just kind of come together, to create an image that people just want to look at and examine and admire in a way, all of its flaws and all of its perfections. It's something that is pretty much going to determine who you are going to be perceived as for the rest of your life, uh, and coming to that realization has definitely saved me a whole lot of more confusion from people. It's just the ups and downs of communicating with people, of understanding why people play the social games that they play, and getting to a better understanding for myself on why I was struggling, making friends, building long-term, lasting relationships. I was playing the social games. I was doing what I was told, and I wasn't getting the results that I was looking for. And it's very confusing. I would try to open up to people, tell people my interests, really, really meet people where they were at, and I was just getting rejected, like left and right. It just did not make any sense to me. That built up a lot of anger in me, where I'm like, what am I doing wrong? What's exactly happening? I'm doing exactly what I was told. I know a lot of people can relate to that, where you just don't understand, like, why am I not making friends? Why am I not getting invited to things from people who I was at least told by in society that are supposed to love me, like my family? Like, why am I just not being embraced from people? And it was just leading to like a whole bunch of this madness. It definitely was turning me. I don't believe people are crazy, but it was definitely the gaslighting that I was getting from people was causing me to second guess a lot of what I was doing, a lot of what my existence was. I was never suicidal, but I definitely had a time in my life where I just didn't want to be here. I didn't know where I wanted to be. I just didn't want to be here, where I was. I didn't want to be who I was. I didn't want to be anybody else. But I definitely didn't be who I was, because I just wasn't getting the results I was looking for, and it was very confusing. But blackpilling myself, especially doing it in doses, not going ham on it, but also being open to everything, not just kind of feeding my ego, but just trying to get to a better understanding of who we are as a people. It definitely pretty much saved my life, to where now I feel like I have control of the narrative of who I am and how I'm going to be perceived moving forward, because as like as a big presence, as an attractive man, you kind of have to come to terms with the fact that you can only really relate to people who are similar to you. You really can't be friends with someone who is just who you aren't equally yoked as. I understand like the numbers system that people use. It makes sense, but I think it's missing a whole lot of nuance. But if you're an 8, you pretty much can only hang out with 8s, 7s, or 9s. You can't really kick it and have a deep, meaningful relationship with like a 6 or even like a 5 the same way you can with someone who's also an 8. There's just so much so many differences biologically that you're just not going to experience the world the same. Um, you can definitely have a relationship. You can definitely be friends. You can even, marry someone. If you're an 8 and you're the other person is a 6 or even a 5, you can definitely do that. But you just have to have that awareness and have that nuance that you're just never going to get to that similarity with that person. You're just never going to get there. Um, because you're just not similar to that person. You are similar, but those similarities aren't are just are there's just way more differences between the two of you that they just become more and more apparent when you start attracting more people who are closer to you. Um, then you really start to be able to open up and to relate and to empathize with that person. Just those conversations are just going to like flow, as fluid as water with fellow 8s, 9s, and 7s versus with a 6 or a 5. And it's these things weren't nearly as problematic years ago because people looked a lot more similar back then, where you really could have that camaraderie with the people in your communities, to where those differences were very very minute and honestly like pretty petty. Where now these differences are actually causing a whole lot of conflicts. Um, and how are we going to get through this? I do not have the answer for that. I just know violence is definitely going to have to be used because that's kind of how we are as animals. Unfortunately, so I know that this is definitely a a situation that's going to have to get dealt with at some point. But as attractive people, we definitely need to have that self-awareness of how we are being perceived in this world. And with so many people being insecure, so many people kind of stuck in this self-loathing mindset, it's like I said earlier, like very much life or death, um, out here. Where how do I put this? We kind of have to come to a understanding that we still need each other as humans. We can't just dispose of people that we feel are less worthy. Even though a lot of people, uh, like I was saying earlier, with marriage, that's going to become a less of a thing because people's self-awareness are pretty much getting to the point where they know that someone's never going to love them if they're like a 5 as much as they love someone who's like a 7 or an 8. Those people are going to have long-lasting marriages or have the potential to have a long-lasting marriage versus 2 5s in today's world, because those 5s they still know that those 7s or 8s exist, when back in the day they didn't. You only knew the people in your town. People looked very similar, so it was very easy to keep that relationship going. And now it's with the internet, people just have way more options. And with those options, as soon as some people there's any type of turbulence in the relationship and doubt starts to creep in, people just are just kind of opting out. And I definitely don't like questioning people's intelligence. If people are doing that, there's probably a reason for that. It's probably a very, very valid reason for that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but if people are opting out of relationships with someone, and they don't seem to be opting back into them, uh, for the most part, it's probably one of the main culprits for why people just aren't trying to build those types of relationships anymore. Those struggle marriages, those struggle sexless marriages, because they know now with this new information that they're getting, that it isn't worth it. It's not worth it to struggle through these things. That they want to actually be happy, or at least be content. And more people are finding out that they can be content with themselves, at least living with themselves, and going to work, having those conversations, those connections elsewhere. I'm trying to figure out where I was going with that. Um, oh yeah, like so many people are finding out now that a lot of people have been born all throughout history, not out of love, but out of obligation, out of people just wanting to have children and not having a whole lot of options at the time, and out of desperation a lot of the times as well, where I'm hearing the horror stories about how parents treat their kids, and I wasn't necessarily treated all that well myself, but like hearing parents pretty much just absolutely just not having nothing, wanting nothing to do with their children, and just being so self-loathing within themselves, and seeing themselves and their child, they just set them up for failure. It's something that is rearing its ugly head, where so many people who even have options to have children don't even want them. And it has nothing to do with the child themselves. It's how they feel about themselves, and what they saw, you know, growing up. They don't want that for themselves, and they're missing a whole lot of nuance of what raising children can be, especially if you're like a bigger presence, you're more attractive than the average person. How many blessings having children can bring to you, to your life, how that can extend your life. Like I said, it depends on how attractive you are. If you're more of a average looking person, then I think it kind of varies from that. It might actually take years off, but out of that, that's getting a little too much in the weeds of it. But this self-awareness that people are getting about who they are, who other people are, and how things weren't as they were told growing up about who they are, what they can achieve, what they can have. It's leading to a whole lot of feelings right now, where people are just trying to pick up the pieces of these shattered expectations that they had. And depending on who you are, your point of view is just going to pretty much dictate where you're going at this point. The only reason why I am still optimistic in doing things like this and want to continue to create and move people forward through all this is because of my experiences. Um, I just am biologically very optimistic, because I just know, no matter what's going to happen, me or people like me are going to make it. There's just too many factors that are just in my favor for me to worry about, a job, a relationship, a girlfriend, a wife, children. All of these things are like pretty much already set for me. I don't have to worry too much about them. Um, I can get in my head about it, but at the end of the day, I can kind of just go into autopilot, and a lot of these things are going to be taken care of for me. So, and that's just a blessing that I have that the average person, the vast majority of people on this planet don't have. They don't have that safety net, and it's not a social safety net; it's a biological safety net, and it's getting that self awareness definitely gave me a lot of clarity on why I was treated that way as a kid. I think probably the start of that is when I started reading Naruto. Started that self-awareness because I never knew that there were other kids who were treated the way that I was treated. I did not realize that that was a common thing. I didn't know that there were Narutos everywhere, all over the planet. But once you really figure out who Naruto is as the character, not so much the manga, who he is, what he represents, who he was always destined to be, how he was treated, this makes a lot more sense, especially from a human animalistic sense. The suffering that he went through made him into the man that we see today. And that's what made this whole process for me. That's what gave me the motivation to continue doing what I'm doing and being the person that I am, because I know the road that I took can only be taken from the best of the best. The vast majority of people just could not handle what I've seen, what I've been through, and what other people who are like me have been through, because it's not made for them. People are only going to put people are only going to pretty much abuse people who can actually handle it. It doesn't make any sense to abuse someone who's going to crumble and not be able to bounce back from it. But getting that biological awareness of who I am and who people around me are it's been a lifesaver, because it definitely gave me clarity of who was for me, who wasn't for me, why people who are for me, and why people who are against me are against me. Once I kind of put on those biological glasses and see things from that perspective, a lot of what goes on in today's society just makes a lot more sense. And that's why societies all over the world are crumbling, because their foundation is not sound at all with biology. It's a lot of fuckery, honestly. And yeah, it's probably for the best that parts of society are crumbling. Society will never really crumble. We will always have societies, but parts will always crumble because we need to evolve. Sort of kind of like a muscle. They need to break down so the new ones can emerge. And that's pretty much what's going on. Parts of society are breaking down, and unfortunately people who are maintaining that are also going to go down with it. And that's why people are acting very, very aggressive about those parts of society that are being crumbled, because that's pretty much all of them. That's their livelihoods. That's all they have left. And I'll speak on more of this on the video game video about how video games are pretty much being reconstructed right now. They're evolving like they've always have. It's what's happening right now is nothing new. It's just a lot of people who created what video games are or helped build it are also the people who are being who are part of the crumbling parts of video games. I think we are in the best time to play video games in human history. Game wise, price wise, inflation technically as a whole hasn't really affected video games as much as other things like gas, food, housing. That's taken a huge hit. But yeah, I don't want to go too much into that, but yeah, there's a lot of things in society are crumbling down because they need to make room for these new changes so we can evolve. And the people who are part of that are definitely panicking. which I would empathize with that. I would be doing the same exact thing if my world was pretty much falling apart right around me. You know, I wouldn't just be sitting there like the meme, like this is fine, everything around me is on fire. So I definitely get why people are doing the things that they do, why people are gravitating towards people that they're gravitating towards. This makes sense. So I definitely do not fault these people for doing what they're doing. This is all, from a biological sense, survival, and I get it. From a social sense, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it does short term. But long term, this is definitely like a life or death situation. And blackpilling myself on how people are from a biological sense, this saved me, and I implore every single person to do that. You know, we all start off blue pill, and depending on who you are, you might take the red pill to be like, okay, this makes me feel better about myself. But at some point, like especially if you're an attractive person, if you're a big presence, you have to black pill yourself to wash all that out and get all that unhealthy cope out of your system, so you can start actually living a more authentic life. Because that's pretty much what the black pill truly is. That's what it was, at least. It's not some doomer, the world's ending type of thing. I mean, certain people, their worlds are ending, but for the most part, for everyone else, like it's just evolution. It's not de-evolution. It's not a catastrophic event. So that's pretty much the basis of this video, is to give you a very incoherent story about how, you know, blackmailing myself saved me, and it will save all of you if you allow it to. If you come to it from a perspective of this is for your benefit, to understand yourself and then understand the people around you from a biological sense, not so much from a social sense. And try not to hold any of this information against other people. We're all I won't say victims, but we're all caught up in this. There's nothing we can do about it from a social or from a biological sense. So from a social sense, you can just kind of gravitate towards people who are going to help you get to where you need to go, be who you need to be, and be very unapologetic about it. But also understand like how the black pill works. You can't work against it. You know, you can't pretend to be someone that you're not. Long term. Short term, socially, you can. We see it all the time. People pretending to be famous and rich and this and that, whatever. Short term, it works. Long term, the black pill will come for you. It will come for you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So, I definitely implore every person, attractive or not, to black pill yourself so you can become an authentic person and live the life that you were supposed to live. And do not lie to yourself about who you are, about where you're supposed to be in life. It's just going to create so much needless suffering in your life. It's a very vicious cycle that can take years off of your life, or you can even take your entire life pretending to be someone that you're not. Like I said, I was doing that for the longest. I thought I was a regular person. There's nothing regular about me. Nothing at all. And the sooner I got to that point, the sooner I've been able to just gravitate and just attract everything that I've wanted in my life. It's been very painful. And this has been, blackpilling myself for, I want to say 13 years, just slowly doing it. And it's been like a very painful process. I don't see anything the same as when I was like in my early teens. Everything is different, but everything's for the better. Everything makes sense now from a social and from a biological sense, because I took that time to understand what was going on around me very authentically without judgment. I accepted everything. If the black pill had terrible news for me, I was going to accept it, which it did. No one's susceptible of all the forms of the black pill. I am not, this some lucky genetic miracle that some people will want to like kind of call me. It's there's pros and cons to everything. It's very neutral. I just know that I am very blessed and gifted. A lot of people are, and we have to protect that for ourselves, and also understand that we all have blessings. Even being born is a blessing. There's a statistic about like the odds of you being born, and it's pretty much less than 1%. So even if you are an incel and you're born, you still have been getting the fruits of so many people's labor that you don't even know about. So much of media, music, songs, movies, TV shows, games, entertainment. You have been just getting the blessings of that because you just hit the lottery of being born. There were so many different versions of you that could have been born, but this is the one that you got. Sure, you're not the most attractive person in the world, but you're still alive, and that's a blessing in and of itself. There's so many incels all over the world, all throughout time, who have just lived amazing lives, and I would like to kind of look into that, because this is more to life than just human connection from like a biological sense of like having someone love you that way, even though that is very, very important, and it shouldn't never be downplayed about how much that type of love, that type of intimacy is very, very important to someone. But this will probably be like a multiple part video. I already know it's only getting close to an hour, but long story short, if you're a big presence, if you feel like you don't fit in with people, that you stand out, I highly suggest that you black pill yourself. I know you've probably been doing it unconsciously over and over throughout your life, but put that right in the front of your mind and save yourself a lot of suffering, unnecessarily suffering, so you can start doing the necessary suffering to get to maximize who you are, and really start living the life that you were meant to live, being who you were supposed to be, and not what society told you that you're supposed to be. So once you do that, like I said, it's very, very painful. Very, like, you're going to go through all the feelings, but it's worth it. There's no words to describe how I felt, how I feel now, but how I felt once I really started to get it. Watching the videos, reading the articles, reading even some of the books. There aren't too many like black pill books. If there are, please let me know. Like true black pill books. I'm not saying like books about the actual literal black pill. I don't want to get too autistic about that, but just more things about how things truly are from a biological sense, and not so much about the social. That's just going to save you so much hurt, so much confusion, so much time, honestly. So yeah, definitely get on that.